Welcome to the Developmental Trauma and Attachment podcast and webinar for clinicians. March's focus is services using the senses, where we will be exploring everything you need to know about how sensory needs play a role in the DTAP treatment process. Join us today as Josh Carlson, Associate Director of the Knowledge Center, introduces us to Amanda Becks and gains her perspective on the DTAP model of treatment and the role of sensory needs in this treatment.
Hello, everybody. We're here with the Knowledge Center podcast this morning about talking about the developmental trauma and attachment model of treatment. And today we're focusing on sensory needs and how that plays a role within that process. And so here today I have Amanda Becks, clinical supervisor here at Chaddock. And so Amanda, tell me just a little bit about yourself, what you do here, and the type of kids you work with.
Sure. So I've been with Chaddock for about 16 years. A majority of that time was working directly with the kids in the cottage. A few years ago, went back, got the master's degree, was a therapist down with the adolescent girls down at Attunement, and then currently a residential clinical supervisor.
Okay. And when you think about sensory needs within kind of the model of care that we do, that trauma-informed, attachment-based care that we offer here at Chaddock, where does sensory, that sensory piece, that sensory component kind of come into play?
When I hear sensory, I automatically think of environment. So what can I do in the cottage, or what can I do in the home to make it friendly? So I'm looking at colors, I'm looking at lighting. Is there a lot of things in the room that are overstimulating to a child? Once I can kind of scan the environment, then I'm looking at what's the kid giving me? How are they responding? Are they rocking? Are they pacing? Are they biting their nails? What are they telling me that they need?
So what I'm hearing you say is that, one, you just look globally or kind of overall the environment. What are things that we need to be considering from kind of a preventative measure? Mm-hmm. But then you also take that a step further by being attuned to the child or the individual you're working with, and really saying, okay, I'm seeing them respond. There's some kind of symptom, there's some kind of action going on. Mm-hmm. Is there a sensory need there that we need to make an adjustment for?
Right.
So can you tell me a little bit about what might that look like if you see someone pacing or rocking? Like what might that process look like?
If I see someone rocking, I may go sit next to them, put my hand on their shoulder. Maybe they just need a grounding presence next to them to let them know, to help them regulate, because they may not know how to regulate because no one gave that to them when they were an infant themselves, so they don't know what they need. If you see kids chewing on a straw or their fingernails, maybe offer them a piece of gum to meet that sensation that they're trying to seek. Sure. Sensory wise.
Okay. And something you said there I thought I really liked, which is because it's so important with the work we do, which is relationships. And sometimes the sensory input is being close in proximity, mm-hmm. physical touch. And that's just such a powerful message of I'm here, I'm with you, I'm going through this with you, I care about you. All the underlying messages that nonverbal communication mm-hmm. provides to our clients. Mm-hmm. So when you think about the symptoms or the behaviors or the challenges that our kids come to us with, are there any kind of commonalities with those symptoms and the sensory needs that you've experienced or kind of seen in your time here at Chaddock?
I would say each child's going to present with their own need of Sure. whatever sensory sensation that they're seeking. A lot of times across the board, what we find is you'll often refer to it in cottage, you'll hear them say big muscle. So we're working on proprioceptive movement. Right. For these kids is huge, because if we sit too long, what are we going to do? We're going to get bored, anxious, we're going to get stir crazy. So we have to get up, we have to work our muscles, we have to do wall push-ups, or we have to go outside and do an activity that's going to get us up and using those muscles, feeling where we're at in space, and then coming back down. So I think that that's one of the commonalities that we see, is really getting the kids up and moving. And again, helping with that regulation.
Right. And so often at Chaddock, we talk about that window of tolerance. And so really part of the sensory input is trying to gauge where they're at, if they're hypo or hyper arousal, and then what can we do with that sensory input or that sensory experience to help them either come down out of that hyper arousal state or come up from the hypo arousal state so that they're regulated in that window of tolerance. Okay. So when we think about sensory needs and kind of where that links into the DTAP, Developmental Trauma Attachment Program, what does that mean to you when you think about how those two pieces fit together?
That really is the foundation of the treatment model, because if we can't meet their sensory needs and help them regulate, we can't build upon that. So it's much like sometimes I'll refer to it as a house. You can't build a house unless you have a sturdy foundation. Right. Because what you're trying to build is just going to collapse. So we really have to meet them where they're at. That's where the attunement, the sensory, the felt safety in that environment comes into play. So then we can use our other modalities and build upon that.
So can you tell me a little bit more about how creating those sensory experiences creates that sense of felt safety? Because I think that's something we talk about often. It's not just about safety, it's about felt safety. It's about how they feel. So how do you as a therapist or in your work with other therapists or direct care staff, how do you work in using sensory experiences create that sense of felt safety?
Again, going back to the environment. So if we're going to walk in somewhere and it's loud, immediately I'm probably going to go over the edge because I can't regulate myself because it's loud, I don't know, it's unpredictable, it's chaotic, and I don't feel safe that way. Right. Again, lighting. Fluorescent lighting is not great. So is there more of the natural light coming in? The colors of the walls. Are they the more the warmer tones? So
I think as I'm kind of hearing you talk, it's recognizing that a lot of the kids come to us with that hyper vigilance and facilitating an environment that keeps them from having to have that heightened state. Like the loud noises creates chaos, and when I feel chaos, I don't feel safe because something may happen. Right. Okay. So how do you support, in addition to that sensory environment, how might you, if you're seeing someone dysregulated, what might you do with a client to help them manage those sensory needs?
So depending on who the kiddo is, and if I have a relationship with them and I know what works for them, I may offer them two choices of something that they're going to need. Do you need a fidget? Do you need a piece of gum? Do you need a walk? Do you need to go outside? Or do you just need me to sit here with you with my hand on your shoulder?
Sure.
So again, based on attunement and where that relationship is, sometimes a kiddo may tell you what they need. Oftentimes they won't in the beginning. So you're really, again, just going to have to be attuned, know what works, and you're going to have to try different things, and not everything's going to work, and that's okay. But you're going to rule out what doesn't work.
Right. And I think sometimes what's really frustrating for adults who are trying to support kids in that way is what may work today might not work tomorrow.
Right.
And what might work tomorrow might not work the next day.
Right.
And so sometimes I found something that works, but now all of a sudden it's not.
Right. So you're going to really have to be present with them in that moment, in the here and now. And again, just because you try it one time and it doesn't work, there may be a time where you want to reintroduce that to see if it maybe works the next time.
Okay.
So a lot of it's going to be repetition, trial and error. What works, what didn't.
So obviously a piece of, the DTAP model is reconnecting or strengthening the connection with a child with their parents, with their caregiving system that we're hoping to get them back connected to. How do you take that step of what you just talked about, that attunement? How do you help where do the parents come in and play that role? How are we supporting the parents in being able to do that?
I think that it's a parallel process. It's not only the child learning different things; it's the parents learning different things as well. And so when they're coming here for visits, or when we're going to their home, really helping them, prompting them, supporting them, providing them that psychoeducation of what might work, what doesn't work, what you could try, what doesn't try, and really just being that support, because it's maybe not going to work the first time, or it's going to look different in the home than it did in the cottage. And that's okay, because we have to remember our environments are different. So kids are going to respond differently in the different environments that they're in. Sure.
So really what I'm hearing, especially with this concept of the sensory piece, is there's a lot of complex variables, and that we have to be flexible enough in our patterns, in our ways of interacting with a child. We have to be able to move and change a little bit. That we can't be rigid in it. That, Miss Amanda told me that, I'm the parent. Miss Amanda told me I have to do A, B, and C to be successful with my child. Well, sometimes we have to make that adjustment because of where the child is at, and so it's us as the providers, that support system, but also the parents being able to see that and make that appropriate adjustment to meet that child's need where they're at in that moment in time.
And change is scary and hard, so we're asking the child to do something differently, and we're asking the parents to do something differently. So again, just being supportive, and it's okay to do it differently. I'm going to do it with you.
Sure. And then again, the parallel process is that's scary for the child, and the parents trying to be there with the child. It's scary for the parent, so we as the therapists and the support staff are there for the parent to help them walk through that process. Okay. So when you're working with clinicians, when, for individuals that might be listening to us today, any advice that you would offer in working with kids, with families, in being able to identify and try to meet those sensory needs in that moment?
Again, I would stress attunement, and really where you're at in that relationship, and that it's okay to try things differently, and it's okay to not know what the answer is. But as long as you can be supportive and in that moment offering choices, trying to figure it out, that's okay. I think sensory, you hit on it earlier, it's a huge concept. It's not just environment. I mean, where you can talk about the sensory diet, which includes food, fidgets, the big muscle activities that we talked about, or for our kids, because sometimes our kids aren't abstract thinkers. They're very black and white. So to try to teach them a sensory component or an intervention, and to try to teach the parents that as well, it takes a lot of attunement and patience.
So you said the word attunement a couple times, and something that comes to my mind as you were talking, and in conjunction with that word attunement, is that it reminds me of parents with a newborn baby, where that baby is seeking out sensory something. I'm cold, I have a wet diaper, I'm hungry, something is happening that's overwhelming my capacity to deal with it, and I'm letting the world know, and then a caregiver comes and meets that need.
Correct.
And that as a parent, over time, we begin to recognize the difference between I need a new diaper cry versus I need something more to eat cry, versus I need something else cry. And so that's a piece of this process, is that attunement it's really learning to not just see the behaviors, but seeing what's underneath the behaviors.
Right.
So that behavior is the cry, so to speak. Now it's my responsibility as the adult to figure out, what's the cry saying?
Right.
How do I meet that need? How do I provide this stimulus, whether it's a sensory snack or hydration or less stimulus or muscle movement, different things. But it really becomes, as the parent, as the adult, it can start to help me feel like there's something that I can do, rather than feeling helpless of my child feels overwhelmed. I can begin to ask myself, what is my child really saying with this behavior? It's no different than a cry of an infant. So how do I begin to recognize that and meet that need?
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts with that?
Exactly. It's a lot of times our kiddos didn't get that when they were little, whether they were in the orphanage and they were, lying in bed and nobody came to pick them up when they were crying. That rocking, that soothing, that regulation, sometimes our kiddos didn't get that. So really being the parent, trying to figure out what they need, and what a shot of confidence for that parent too, because at times, like you said, you feel very helpless. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't take care of my child.
Yeah.
So then we go into our own little hopeless cycle. Oh my gosh, I'm at a loss. But if we can start to see things work, we can increase our confidence, which is going to most likely increase our attunement to our kid, right? Yeah. Because now I know what works. I know that I need to do this before we go to this activity, because if I don't do it, we're not going to be successful. So again, increasing our confidence and setting our kids up for success, because we're so attuned for them that we know what sensory need we need to meet before we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you spending some time with us today and talking about the Developmental Trauma and Attachment Program model of care, trauma-informed attachment-based services, and really kind of digging a little deeper into that sensory piece. And really that was just like the tip of the iceberg. Yes. There's so much more that kind of goes along with that. But really appreciate you sharing with those who are listening today what that means to you, and how, just a little bit about how we use that here at Chaddock.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Developmental Trauma and Attachment podcast and webinar for clinicians. Be sure to subscribe and follow the Knowledge Center at Chaddock on Facebook for future episodes and for more in-depth content from the Knowledge Center. For further resources and training opportunities, please log on to www.theknowledgecenter@chaddock.com. We hope you join us again next time.